Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Playbook.
Welcome back to the next episode of Beyond the Playbook and the Varsity House podcast. We are here in Cleveland, Ohio with Shaun Crawford, former Notre Dame defensive back. Shaun, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, thank you for making the trip down to Cleveland. I mean, this is obviously our first time both doing a collab, and so from Varsity House, I thank you for coming down here and hopping on my show and then, tag teaming and doing one together.
Absolutely. It's super cool to see the brand that you guys have kind of started to build with your podcast. And, I think obviously based on the guests that we've had on as well, there's a similar alignment based on, the topics that we like to cover. So we appreciate you having us out here. But we listened to a few of your episodes. The last few, you've had Brady Quinn, you've had Coach Kelly, you've had, Wu and, Newsome come on. And you talk a lot about the importance of, being from Ohio and how that's helped, develop your career as a football player. And now, like, after football, you're creating your own brand with your own podcast. How much has, being from Ohio, playing at St. Ed's played a role in your development, as a football player and as a character?
Yeah, I guess I never really knew how big Ohio football was until I left and until I went to college. And, we went to Notre Dame together, but when you get there, it's like everyone understands how good Ohio is at football, similar to Florida or to California as well. And so being there and coming from St. Ed's, we played the competition in high school that I would see at the next level pretty much, and which was one of the reasons why I chose St. Ed's for high school. I knew I wanted to play Division I, and I knew I wanted to play against some of the best teams in the state, not thinking that I would go to Notre Dame or even play Division I and be like, this is a competition that I'll play against, but mainly because I just wanted to challenge myself. And in the state of Ohio, I believe Division I has the best talent. And so even St. Ed's, though, we were a private school, so we played Cardinal Mooney. We played teams from New Jersey, like Bergen Catholic and some of those teams out there. And then all of the Cincinnati teams, Elder, X, Moeller. And so just having a schedule like that, when I got to Notre Dame, I thought I was very prepared for what was in front of me. And so playing against those guys and then seeing those guys do well and then eventually make it to the NFL, those are some of the guys that I kind of lean on now with the podcast. It's like we built that relationship over time, maybe from high school or maybe from college, where it's like now we have the same type of upbringing, and so we can kind of come on a podcast and just, talk, shoot the shits, and have a good conversation. But
I didn't realize there was going to be so many kids from Ohio at Notre Dame. I really only knew about you and a few other walk-ons that were from the Ohio area. And whenever I got to Notre Dame, I was kind of surprised by the surplus of, Cleveland bodies that would be ending up at Notre Dame, which I thought was really cool. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Shaun, was, you've talked a little bit about your recruiting story, how you kind of started off being recruited by Michigan before you ended up flipping to Notre Dame. But what were some of the coolest recruiting, what were some of the coolest recruiting visits you got out of high school? You got recruited by Northwestern, you got Michigan State.
That's funny you mentioned Northwestern first, because it was a school that I didn't have on our radar. But, when you're in high school, it's you want to take every offer,
Yeah.
And so Northwestern was different because they called me and were like, we need your ACT scores, we need your GPA and things like that, to where it's you actually had to qualify to even, get the offer, and which I did. But I never took a visit to Northwestern. I took a visit to the U and Tennessee, Michigan, and Notre Dame. And so I feel like my recruiting stories aren't that great because I kind of knew where I wanted to go. And so growing up a Michigan fan, my entire life. Once I got the Michigan offer, it was just like, that's where I'm going. But I took a visit to Tennessee, and which was beautiful. I got to stay at Peyton Manning's hotel, which is awesome. Like it's on top of a hill and things like that. But
Pretty impressive stadium, isn't it?
oh, it's unbelievable. It's huge.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so seeing that, and it's different than Michigan's too, because Michigan's is like in the ground, and I think Tennessee's is like out of it. So it's
Yeah.
like it looks like really, really high. And seeing those things was pretty cool. Then Miami was a little different. I got to go to the campus and see all the things, but I always say this, like this was back in 2015, so I don't know, or even 2014, so I don't know if they changed everything or, designed all the new stuff. But back then, there was no indoor field. Obviously, the stadium is away from campus, and so it wasn't too appealing. I always tell people, if you put that campus in Ohio, like not many people are probably going to go there. But that was pretty cool. Obviously, it's a beautiful area down there in Coral Gables, though. But and then Michigan, no cool stories. But I got to see that Trey Burke basketball team with like Trey Burke and Holloway and Robinson. That was like the time that I was getting recruited, so I got to see those. I got to see a number of those games, and that place was rocking for sure.
Why didn't you go to Michigan? I'll put it this way. What was the deciding factor?
Michigan was starting to decline at that time, and Notre Dame was starting to come up. So this was the Brady Hoke era. And so my junior year, Brady Hoke, they had just lost a bowl game, I forget. And it sucks because I had to call him like after the bowl game. Like, I'm sure he doesn't want to hear this from a recruit. Like, just losing a bowl game, and then you're getting
you just made a bad night work.
And then you get a call saying that I'm going to decommit. But that was it at the end of the day, to where before I committed to Michigan, I took a trip to Notre Dame, and I was blown away by the campus. I was blown away just by everything, just the culture, the environment, and pretty similar to St. Ed's. We have our own small Golden Dome, just like Notre Dame. But when I took a visit there, it was breathtaking, and so I didn't end up getting an offer. And I tell this story, but I was the DC there, Diaco at the time, said I was too short to play DB there. And so I was like, all right, Indy's off my radar. I don't like Indy no more. I'm done with Indy. And so I went on to commit to Michigan, which I was happy about. So I played my junior season, and then Diaco ended up going to UConn. BVG came in, and Kelly was calling a bunch, and BVG was calling a bunch. Heaston came by to visit, and so kind of just reopened everything, and I took another visit and got the same feeling, that same welcoming. So it was like, this is where I need to be. So,
and you were kind of similar to me, where you didn't really grow up a Notre Dame fan at all, right?
No, I grew up a Michigan fan.
Yeah.
It's actually, so when they lost the 2012 national championship, it was like, I was excited.
Yeah,
you were
talking shit.
I was talking trash to my Notre Dame friend, or Notre Dame, to all the Notre Dame fans at school, like, yo, like they suck, like whatever. And then come to find out, years later, I go to Notre Dame.
End up going.
It was, it's funny how it all happened. I mean, at the end of the day, like when we talk about this, like the injuries and stuff that I had, people always talk about, I was like unlucky as far as playing and things like that. But I feel like I was very lucky in the decisions that I made, because going to St. Ed's and then going to Notre Dame, I think I made two of the best decisions ever.
Yeah, no doubt. I got to tell you, it's funny because I went to Ohio State, but I grew up a Notre Dame fan.
Mm.
But I ended up I chose Ohio State in the end and ended up playing there. But it's just funny how it works out, But, I mean, heck, you won a lot of football games. I mean, you were there, 6 years? Because tell me.
I heard a stat. I heard a stat last week at the wedding. I think it was Shaun Crawford has ran through the tunnel at Notre Dame the most times out of any other player to play football there.
See, that might not be true, because a lot of those years I wasn't even able to walk.
You were hurt, but
I don't think I even
walk with a jersey. A jersey out.
Yeah. I walked through that thing like many times for sure, but I was there 5.5. People like to say 6, but I was there 5.5. But I was fortunate for Coach Kelly like kept giving me an opportunity to keep coming back because nowadays a coach may be off of guy and you may have to transfer and things like that.
You got new recruits coming in.
Yeah, for sure. And so he always gave me a chance to come back the next year and compete and do my thing. But ended up getting a master's out of it from Notre Dame, so can't complain.
Heck no, you got a great career. I mean, tell me about your injury history. What happened?
So freshman year camp, this was 2015. Like our team was loaded. We had Jalen Smith, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, Will Fuller. That like crazy team. And I came in as a freshman. BVG put me in like with the twos at nickel. Like the first week of camp, I was balling out. I was making plays. Second week, I was with the ones, and so I'm just this little old I was 17 at the time too, so I'm this little 17-year-old freshman playing with all these future first rounders. And like week 3 or 4 of camp, I think week 4 or 3, it was a 2-a-day. This was when 2-a-days were still a thing, and so wild time. But our second practice, we came back out and we were doing one-on-ones, and I ended up tearing my ACL. And at that time, like it was something I've never felt before. I was never injured before or previous to that. And so definitely felt like in pain and did all those things. And it didn't really hit me until the ESPN announced it, to where it was like I got a notification on my phone, or, it comes across the bottom like 4-star, going to be out for the season. And at that time, I didn't even tell anyone. I told my family. But other than that, like I was able to like go back to my door. I was in Siegfried. So I was sitting in Siegfried at this time, like while this news is going across ESPN. And then everyone's hitting me up, blowing me up, and then whatever. So rehab that year, come back, and with an ACL, it's kind of like it's normal now. So with an ACL, I wasn't too hurt by it. I was just like, all right, it's something I got to do. Like watched a lot of Adrian Peterson, like motivation stuff like that. Looked up Hines Ward, didn't even have ACLs, and he had the career that he had. So looked out to a lot of like outside sources for motivation and stuff like that. Come back the following year, earn a starting spot, we play Texas at Texas.
Return the extra point for
crazy
for
environment. Yeah. Had a great game, had an interception that set up a touchdown. I had a great individual game. We ended up losing, but my first home game that I got to play, I ended up tearing my Achilles, like maybe the third play of the game. And that one like hurt the most just because I was like, dang, I just came back from this injury.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be my season. I just came back, or we were coming off the Texas game where I played well, and now I got to go through an entire rehab process.
Another time.
And so that was the first thing that I thought about. It was like another year of rehab. To where it's like it wasn't the injury, it wasn't like I wasn't sad that I wasn't playing. It was just like, dude, I got to go through another year of rehab, and the Achilles rehab is very, very difficult. But like again, kind of use the same plan of as far as like looking for motivation and inspiration. And that was the time that Kobe's documentary came out, Muse, where he tore his Achilles. And so I probably watched that thing like 3 times a week, just to help me get through that moment. But
because you kind of went through a similar thing too, didn't you? Like your freshman year?
My first couple of years, I broke my jaw.
Ah.
Yeah, it was just a freak out.
Yeah, tell him
the helmets probably weren't as good then back then, huh?
No, it was weird. I got caught in I was tangled. It was a goal line draw. I got tangled up, and literally the pulling guard that came around. I mean, I ended up on the bottom of a pile in my chin. It just got to the point. We were in a big pile up where there was nowhere else to go. I mean, I actually had turf burn on my chin and then it just cracked. And that was at the end of camp. It's kind of like you. Mm-hmm. You went through my freshman year, and then so I obviously redshirted that year, and then when I get through all the way through to the spring game, go all the way to the spring game, had a really good spring. And at the end of the spring, you're like, God, so, back then spring ball was long and hard, and I was like, okay,
still
it's over.
I would say I would agree.
Yeah, I get a chance to kind of relax, and I wasn't even supposed to be on the kick. We were in the spring game. We had kickoff, full go kickoffs, and I wasn't even supposed to be in there. Somebody got hurt and said, "Hey," so I was like, "Okay, I'll fill in." I went in there and cracked my collarbone making a tackle on the kick on the.
Can you ever imagine Coach Kelly putting us through kickoff drills during the spring?
I would try to get out of those. Kickoff is dangerous. Kick return is very dangerous.
I mean, even during the season, really
doing it in the spring game was
that's why
it's crazy. I mean, full go, and so then it wasn't that bad. I mean, the injury sucked, but it was like, you kind of. That's the last thing you want to be doing at the end of the year.
So did you end up playing? Did you end up giving a comeback that year towards the end of the year or no?
Oh yeah, I was ready by the time camp came.
Oh okay.
Yeah, so it was, but it was just I know what it was like to kind of go through the injuries to start out. Was that Achilles your last injury that you dealt with?
No, so I ended up playing the junior year healthy, and come back and do senior year, and I tear my other ACL in a one-on-one drill like the week of the Michigan game, and so my whole thing with camp is like. For some time, when I got healthy in my 5th and 6th year, it was like one-on-ones. Like I would were iffy about one-on-ones because I didn't tore my ACL twice in one-on-ones, and like we get close to the game, it's like I want to play in the game, and so those were I don't know those, but I don't look back on it and be like, dang, like I wish I wasn't in there, because it's a drill that I've done.
You've had
thousands of
reps.
times. Yeah.
Right.
So, and it was just, unfortunate that happened. But
I was never, as a coach, really as a coach or player, I was never a big fan of one-on-ones.
I like one-on-one. I like playing one-on-ones off, just because I can kind of work on my tempo, work on my back pedal and brake. But outside of that, I don't like.
Just defensively, it's kind of an unrealistic drill.
Right.
I mean, plus the receivers,
they should catch the ball.
That's the toughest part.
You'll be like 10 yards off. They'll run an out route, and then they'll talk shit to you when they're running by you. It's like
that's the tough. I think that's what keeps one-on-one alive is just the competition, because I think people see that like there's no true value in it, but just the competition. You want to see people compete, and
it's just totally different than when you line up and there's other people on the field. I mean, you get guys running post routes and catching it over on the other number. It's like, you should catch. I used to tell the offensive guys they should get 80. They should complete 80% of the balls.
Mm-hmm. As a coach, how did you see how did you view one-on-ones?
I coached like the beginning of it and the end. You look for teachable things, but some of the routes. I mean, it was just unrealistic. You'd see. I mean, I'd say, quit drawing shit up in the dirt. Make the quarterback draw. I'm a defensive guy, so I was like, make the quarterback get rid of the ball on time, because they don't. And I didn't. The last thing I wanted to do was watch a bunch of deep balls. It's like that isn't the way it goes.
Right.
But I will tell you this: I banned our guys from doing one-on-ones in the off season because without supervision and guys talking shit and going out there, I hated it, because that's how people get hurt.
Yeah.
The competition ramps up, and I mean the worst thing is guys pulling on each other's jerseys and that type of thing. It just I was always scared to death that I was going to lose guys because of let's face it, everybody wants to compete, and in an unrealistic drill, like I used to say, do releases. Like the best thing
we started towards the end, we started to do a lot of releases more than just one-on-ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. Teach the release part of it, the first part of it, and then keep the guys from getting tangled up and going to the ground. And that's just what I always worried about, because I mean I've seen just too many guys over the years get hurt.
I think that was the main lesson that I kind of learned from Coach Kelly, just like going through his program for 4 years. You probably experienced a little more than I did since you were there for 6 seasons, but was the emphasis that he put on just like keeping his players healthy, or like trying to. Like he would, I would get annoyed by it at times. Like he would just, like in one-on-ones, like a DB like gets tangled up with a wideout, he's like, stay up.
Yeah.
But the emphasis in every single drill that he had, just like keeping guys as healthy and not trying to bang each other up during the week before, a big game. That's what I kind of got out of Coach Kelly, was like how to run the program that way, making sure your guys are going to be healthy, before the game starts.
If you're not tackling, you shouldn't be tackling. And I mean, how many times you see guys, especially soft tissue injuries, from a guy reaching out and pulling somebody's jersey? And,
right.
I mean, that's gonna happen when it's full go and full contact. But that stuff, when guys learn how to practice, it can be avoided. And
That's it's funny because we talk about that, and it was also the connection to Coach Bayless and his strength staff, which I think played a huge part in that as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you can attest to this, but just the coaches and the strength staff being on the same page to where
absolutely,
if we had a tough day of practice, then they knew to take it easier on us, like a little bit, but take it easier on us in the weight room. Or if a guy's numbers aren't up to standard in the weight room, then it's kind of a conversation that needs to be had with the coach, maybe on reps or something like that. So I do think that we got better at that over the year as well, and we start to see like a lot more growth and development in the players.
It wasn't like it would have been like my first summer where it was right after the 4-8 season.
Oh yeah,
and Bayless came in.
That was different though. That was different.
I mean,
I don't think Notre Dame was allowed to have another 4-8 season, so we had to change every single thing.
Yeah.
Bayless is a good coach. I mean that whole strength staff does a hell of a job, But yeah, you got to be on the same page with the strength staff. I mean, imagine, like I always used to be like, make sure I know like when they, you didn't want to be out going doing one-on-ones or doing a ton of running after a heavy leg day or like what, because obviously you always go through a season and they have it kind of mapped out as to when they're going to be putting more weight on and that type of thing, and like when their legs are going to get taxed. I didn't care as much about upper body stuff. I wanted to know when are they putting the weight on those guys, and when were they going to be, like if they're getting up in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning and heavy squatting, okay, we got to be real careful with these guys that day, and there had to be communication that went on there.
Yeah. You just reminded me of keeping weight on. Bayless always made sure we were, staying up to our weights. I just remember our freshman year, bro. We're walking into a lift on a Friday. We would do Friday weigh-ins, right?
Yeah.
So we were walking into a lift on Friday, and I just see Woo walk in with his hands in his pockets, and he's got like the 2.5 pound dumbbells in his.
Oh yeah, I've
his,
seen people have to have
funny.
to cheat a little bit to make the weights, because you lose point. Like we did a point system.
Yeah.
The SWAT team, so it's like you lose points if you're not up and then you got to have a conversation with the coach on why are you light and things like that, and it's just not a fun conversation at all.
SWAT team was the way to hold people accountable, though. I thought that was great because
that was because you had a certain.
It's all
group on your
quantifiable
team, right? You had to,
yeah. So I think it was 10 or 12 people. Each SWAT team, and so basically just it could be classroom attendance, like if you're missing class or if you weren't up on study hall, things like that, you could lose points. Late to a workout or not making weight, missing training table, things like that, they can dock you points. But there are also ways to earn points if you're hitting numbers in the weight room and excelling in the weight room, or extra hours of study hall, things like that. You were able to gain points for your team, and so at the end of the week, we review it and see who wins, and obviously like it's just competition. So,
but the way they set it up was like the only way you're gonna really be a detriment to your team was if you were like just not showing up or like just not doing the little things like going to class or like showing up to a lift on time, just like simple things like that.
I mean,
but,
when you got to be accountable to your teammates, that's the best kind of motivation,
Yeah,
and then
like if you have guys missing
even
lifts,
in conditioning, like obviously conditioning's hard in the summer.
Yeah,
but if I get 8 points, my team wins this weekend. So if I could win one gash or win a certain amount of gashes, and it's like, all right, I'll do that for my team, because now it's bigger than me. To where it's like, yeah, it's hot, I'm tired, I'm sore from the lift before.
Just got to win one.
Just got to win one. Yeah, you just got to win
two.
one.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how you see it as everything you start to do is for your team. And so by the time you get to the season, it's like you're already accustomed to working for your team. And so I think that's why we had many successful seasons and why they'll continue to have successful seasons.
I mean, I thought you had a hell of a career, and I enjoyed watching you because I watched obviously about 90% of your games and knew about you coming out in high school and all that. So I mean, it was fun watching you go. Did you get it? I'd love to hear about, because obviously I spent 9 years coaching in the NFL. What was what was the reception you got from the NFL people because of the injuries? Was it real hard?
It was hard, and on the injury side, it was hard, but also because I was 24 coming out, which is young. But to the NFL people, people come out at 21. Some come out at 20, 22, and so that was an issue. I was 23. Then by the time camp started, I was 24. But that was an issue, and so I was like battling those two things, and so. But I kind of knew the talent that I had, and it was something that I really couldn't change. And so based off the injuries, I used Pro Day to try to, change that narrative. And so ended up having a great Pro Day, still ran a 4.4 and jumped like a 36. And the shuttle was like a 3.9 or 4.02 with like a 6.7 L cone. So I went out there and tried to prove to the fact that I was still healthy. And, so I feel like I did what I could do on my end, but those were some of the two biggest things that I heard.
It's just interesting because, when I think back to my time, like I've always said that there's so many factors that get in the way of good. Like when I watched you play, I was like, there's a good football player. He can help a team. Obviously your character, everything that you brought to the table. But it's so funny because the NFL, They break things down so much. I think sometimes they get in their own way of getting good football players on their team. They find reasons not to take guys instead of saying, okay, just put the film on. We'll look at the guy play. You just hear so many different, and let's face it, a big part of it comes down to who do you end up getting your shot with.
Right.
Is it a good fit or is it not a fit? Is it, if a guy was drafted by this team rather than this team? We were talking a couple weeks ago about Jamarcus Russell was talking about his experience and how he ended up with the Raiders back in that day, and when Al Davis was still alive and all that. And what if he had got taken by, the 49ers or the Patriots?
Even talking to Brady Quinn, I mean, he was drafted by the Browns, and so it's kind of a thing that, like, you're a quarterback, you get drafted by the Browns, your career kind of ends there. So. He was just talking about just not having stability as far as the coach, as far as the management, and even players and things like that around him. And so he was telling us like that actually like probably affected his career a lot. And so, I mean, there's probably a ton of guys, that come into the league and kind of get drafted to a bad organization, so to speak, but
or just the wrong fit.
Yeah.
Or maybe a wrong coach, or a lot of things.
Because a lot of, especially I think the NFL is really system-based. To where
definitely.
A lot of people, depending on the system, you can excel in it, and you go to a different system and not. To where, like for a corner, if you're a zone corner and you go to a man scheme, like you're gonna struggle, But and then obviously opposite. But
we had a kid when I was at LSU, Glenn Dorsey. He was a player, one of the best college players I've ever been around. I mean, and just did everything. Was a Lombardi Award winner. He was a 3 technique, and he got drafted by the Chiefs. And then, like a year after he was there, they came in and they changed it to 3-4, and he goes from being a 3 technique, and they ask him to put on 15, 20 pounds and become a 4-eye. Like playing D end, like playing on the tackle, and that wasn't what he was.
Right.
And he did it. And, next thing you know, he's playing, he's a 315, 320-pound nose guard or playing 4-eye, and had a decent career. But I always say that if he would have stayed in a different system, who knows how his career would have went. But it's just, I've just seen it so much over the years. And I looked at your injury history and all the things you went through, and it just, you hate to sit back and look, and I know you probably don't have any regrets, but it's like, you wonder what would have happened,
Yeah, I think I probably think about that like every day, like what if I wasn't injured, or what if this didn't happen, but then I would be in a completely different situation, now to where I think about it. What if I did have everything and I got drafted and do all those things? Like, would I still have the relationships that I have now today, or would I still?
Would you learn as much
Yeah,
from those experiences?
I would probably be a completely different person, maybe
Right.
I wouldn't be as humble or something like that. And so I kind of look at it as that, to where it's something that I can't change. And even though I was injured, like my playing career, I feel like I had a full one. I mean, it was a lot, but it taught me a lot of things. And so I still got the opportunity at the NFL, and talk about a system to where the Raiders was just. I went to the Raiders last year, and you see how that year ended up for them, or even just like with the coaching change and the GM gone, and the entire defensive staff that I had there is now with the Colts, I believe. So it's a lot of shifting and a lot of movement in the NFL, and it's tough to be right,
Oh, I think, I mean, that's really the same can be said. I mean, for all the great experiences I had coaching and stuff, believe me, I think about some of the jobs I didn't take, some of the jobs I did take, and you'll sit there. Sometimes you sit there and think back how I wonder if I wish not I wish I would have, but I wonder what it would have been like had I taken that job or whatever. You think about those things, and like you say, a lot of things is it the right place at the right time, and I made all my decisions based on my wife and kids, and we're, but you sit there and think about, okay, if that hadn't been the case and this job had been offered to you and it was someplace else to go live, what would that have been like, but like you say, you can't really have any regrets. You live your life and take it for what it is, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you guys talked about Ohio obviously having this huge impact on football. You're from Youngstown. I mean, I feel like anytime someone talks about football in general throughout the country, I feel like Youngstown has to be mentioned. And even for me, my mom was a principal at Warren Harding, and so I already knew about Youngstown, Cardinal Mooney, and things like that. Brandon Beecham was one of my favorite players.
Really?
Yeah, Zordich. So that team, McCarthy was the quarterback, right?
Yeah.
That team was like one of my favorite teams, like growing up, and so because I was always out there in Warren, and Mooney would just beat up on Warren. So I actually saw him play at the Hall of Fame Stadium too. That one, I forget the year, but
Yeah.
they had an amazing team that year. And so going into high school, I took a visit to Mooney actually. Ended up not working out, but it was But yeah, talk about Mooney and just talk about Youngstown and just the impact that how impactful football is there. Got the Stoops, you got you guys, and
It's been great. I mean, I was telling your brother a little bit about this earlier, but I came in my sophomore year. So we had lived in Nebraska for like 8 years before we had moved to Ohio, and it was great just being able to transition from like completely different school to another in high school. In the middle of high school was great. Like I fit right into the program. It's very competitive. Like everybody just wants to compete and win. And the area's it's gone down a little bit, just the amount of kids that are going through all these programs now. But we had our cousin Mark on to our podcast a few weeks ago, and he just kind of broke down that team that you were talking about with the McCarthys and all those, the Zordages, Beecham, all those guys. And to like look at what they put together, they had probably one of the best like high school teams ever to come out of Northeast Ohio.
Yeah.
Super cool to be able to like look back on that as like a small town, because like the metro population of Youngstown's probably like what, maybe a little over 300,000, maybe. Well, the city
for the
entire
city's
metro
probably
area,
60, but when you talk about all the
like
surrounding
Warren
areas, I don't know, maybe a few
Canfield.
hundred.
Yeah, it's about a few 100,000, but
there's some players.
there's a lot of good
Yeah,
players.
yeah.
A lot of different, a lot of success and a lot of different types of athletics: football, baseball, basketball, boxing is another big one. But yeah, I'm always proud to say I'm from Youngstown. It's
It's wild how it's changed, you know. I mean, I think back, you know, I mean, I graduated '86. You guys weren't even a thought at that time, but you know, at that time, there were probably, I don't know, Division I schools. There were probably 16, 17, 18, just in the between the Steel Valley Conference and the City Series. Which, so I mean, you think about the amount of kids there were. I mean, there were 15, 20 kids going big time every year. I mean, there were coaches where, you know, I remember Nick Saban. You know, he recruited me. He was at Michigan State at the time, and I think that's the only area he recruited for Michigan State. He would come in and he would recruit Youngstown and Warren. That's it. You know, and that's the way that, you know, that's one thing. People do that in Cleveland. Cleveland's a lot bigger than Youngstown, and then you come to Youngstown, and you're talking about a lot of great football players and a lot of great tradition. I mean, think of the state championships that have come out of Northeast Ohio. It's crazy when you really think about it. And,
Did you guys win a state title?
Yeah, I won my senior year, but since I left, I think they won 3.
Yeah.
So they're doing well.
what was your record against Ignatius?
I think I was 2-3, maybe 3-3. I played them a lot because my freshman year I ended up getting moved to. We had injuries.
Oh yeah, because you probably played him in the playoffs too, right?
Yeah, so we played him. So my freshman year I moved up to varsity, and I still count the one I didn't play. So I dressed in the regular season, and we ended up losing. And then we ended up playing him in the second round of the playoffs, and they threw me in there because a corner got hurt, and I had an interception in the fourth quarter. And I thought we were going to win the game. I thought it was the biggest thing ever. I was this little 14-year-old freshman making an interception in the playoff game. We ended up fumbling, and they kicked the field goal, and they won. But so I think we lost 2 that year, and then my sophomore year we beat them. And then junior year we lost, and then senior year we beat them. So I think it was 3-3, I think, yeah. But
so you guys would have to play them like probably one of the last games of the regular season, and then go and play them.
So they changed it now, which I'm glad I got to play the way I did. So it was always the last game of the season, pretty much the biggest game in the city, kind of like Kent McKinley and Massillon.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're the last game anymore, but now they moved it to like week 7 or something, and so
because you would play him
probably how it
sometimes,
should
and then
be.
you would play him the next week, right?
we usually never.
I know that happened.
That happened.
one time,
That
I
happened a
remember.
few years ago, I think,
Yeah.
because one of our
Yeah, a
family
couple. I
friends-
think it was at the Brown Stadium, maybe.
Yeah, because
But
they played last game of the season, and then they had to play the very next week.
Yeah, I
for
think
its
that's
regular
why they
playoffs.
changed it. But with me, when I was there, we were pretty much like probably the 1 or 2 seed, so we never really saw each other like till the end. But no, those are some great games for sure. Like Ursulin's your rival?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ursuline Borman Fitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we played. They had a run. This was after Teague, so I was like, just like I said, I was in Warren a lot, so I would see like Teague and like Youngstown has some like true. I know Youngstown has some ballers, and Chlorette, all those guys. But even playing Ursuline, like they were a tough team when we played them. They had great running backs, like physical running backs. Fortunately, when I played Mooney, like they were kind of on the decline.
Yeah,
There were like a couple players that were good, but like as a whole team, like they weren't that. They talked the most trash though.
I was about to say.
You
I was
guys
about to ask
Mooney
you.
talked the most trash ever when we played, and I was like, dude.
Do you remember? So I wasn't even at Mooney yet whenever you guys were playing against him, but I just remember hearing the story about how one of our wideouts was tweeting at Shaun before the game. Like Shaun's like a big time recruit, so like everybody knows Shaun before we're going in to play St. Ed's. So like this one of the wideouts at Mooney at the time, who we both know, was tweeting at Shaun like,
Was it? Do you
"I'm
know
gonna
which
lock you
year?
up."
Was it junior or senior year?
I think it had to have been your senior year, or it would have been my sophomore year. So yeah, your senior year. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just went and just responded and locked them up.
Yeah, well, I think it was raining that game. If I'm remembering it correctly, because I think we played at YSU that game, so it was raining.
Yeah.
So yeah, he didn't do much. But no, Mooney. I always had good games against Mooney, but
Didn't you guys scrimmage? You guys probably would have scrimmaged against Mooney a little bit.
my
Didn't you?
freshman, I don't remember.
Yeah, I
But I
don't know.
like since freshman year, I feel like
Because I got there my sophomore year, so I don't really remember much from. I just heard stories, but
Did you like playing at YSU? Like, did you like playing the
yeah, I
home games
loved
there?
it. Yeah, it was awesome. Like we didn't really have any other choice until like recently.
That
they just
started my
moved, but-
freshman year. We, I mean, heck, back in the day when there were more people in Youngstown,
They would fill it.
we'd fill it almost every week. I mean, it would be, 16, 17,000 people for the games every week.
Right.
Because, I mean, you'd be playing, one week we'd be playing Ursuline and you're playing Fitch and Boardman and I mean, that was, now it's changed so much. People don't go to the games as much anymore. I mean, but then again, when you guys play Ignatius, what do you guys have? You guys will fill any
Yeah, we
stadium.
fit. Yeah, buyers. We usually sell out buyers. I would say we had a good because our team was really good. So people knew that like our senior year, I don't know the exact number, but we might have seven guys go D1, and we had Hedgie even go to YSU and stuff like that. So our team was like stacked that year. So we pretty much like sold it. Like our fans were showing up everywhere. But no, I think that's just like I think that's just Ohio football though. That we really like love our football, and
There's a lot of great rivalries and like on the high school level too.
Yeah, for sure. Do you I was trying to think, do you still play Harding at all or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they play
Mooney
every
still
year.
plays Harding. We got to play Lynn. We got to play Lynn Bowden my senior year.
Okay, yeah.
And we got kind of lucky. They scored at the end. We were up by a touchdown, and Lynn throws a touchdown pass to make it 35-34, and we blocked the extra point to win the game. And
That wasn't Mooney on the highlight tape that like went viral.
that was Ursuline.
Okay.
So when Lynn
Where he like, yeah.
literally like he was I don't know if you saw this clip, but he was the punter for Harding. Well, he was also the quarterback, but they were punting on like 4th and 20, and they kind of had a bad snap, and Lynn kind of had to go pick it up, and he just scrambles around and ends up going like 100 like 98 yards for 6.
Yeah, it was.
But it's one of the most insane plays ever because he breaks like 8 or 9 tackles and was one of the most explosive athletes.
I mean, a lot of those guys at Kentucky, say that if they had started him at quarterback, they believe that like if he would have started his senior year at quarterback and didn't get moved there like whatever week 5 or 6, whatever they did, they think he would have been at the Heisman Trophy dinner. They don't know if he would have won, but
it was Burrow's year, so it would have been hard, obviously. But
whose year was that? Oh, that was
Burrow.
Joe Burrow's
Yeah.
year. But they think he would have been part of the conversation. But
'cause
he was a special athlete, man. He was so elusive.
but not even guys like I mean, you've played against plenty of talent as well here in the area in Cleveland. Like, I can't really even think of some of the guys from Ignatius you would have played against, but obviously you play with 600.
Glenville had some guys like Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah.
Who else did they have? Like, I didn't play against these guys, but they were like coming up, or they just got them before me, like Cardell Jones, Shane Wynn, Frank Clark. All those guys were from Glenville just alone.
Glenville,
And then
yeah.
Draymond Jones was from Ignatius. Tim McVeigh, I don't know if you know him, but he was a really good running back.
Glenville, who was their coach was
Ted again.
Ted Ginn, yeah.
Well, what is it now? Are they all playing? Like the kids who go to Ginn Academy, do they play at Glenville?
Yeah.
Yeah, because like Ginn
I think,
Academy
but
doesn't
when
have
you-
their own team, right?
Yeah, so when you go to Ginn Academy, I think you're able to play for any Cleveland public school, though.
Okay.
So-
I didn't know that.
But most of them choose to go to. Most of them choose to play for Glenville. But yeah, they have a great kid too. But you mentioned Stoops. I want to talk about where did this coaching tree come from in Youngstown? Like, how did it start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's funny that how it goes. I just think that, like anything, first of all, I think that we were all coached extremely well growing up. You know what I mean? And a lot of the guys from but you got guys that played kind of all throughout Youngstown that ended up getting involved in coaching. And I always say, people ask that question a lot, but I think it really came down to, like anything, you have the right principles of the sport being beat into you when you're young. What it takes to be successful, the work ethic, the fundamentals, really the basics, kind of the foundation on which to build upon. And obviously they had a positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you're not going to do anything you had a shitty experience doing. So I think a lot of people, and then you move along. It's kind of crazy how it happens, but you look through, I mean, just Mooney alone, there's guys who have coached Division I. It's crazy.
I know. I look at it and it's like, if you go to Mooney right now as a kid, you low-key got a good chance of making a Division I. One of those coaches will pick you up somewhere,
Yeah, that was the coolest part about, and I always tell people this, like, moving from Nebraska to Ohio, like, you're going to school at a, private school in Lincoln, Nebraska. You might get Scott Frost, you might get your Scott Frost, Bo Pelini's walking through from time to time, but, like, you're really not going to get that many coaches coming in to see you. Mm-hmm. But, like, whenever you come into Ohio, you got, like, you could see, Mark D'Antonio walk down the hallway one day. It's like, where the heck did that come from?
Yeah.
Or, Dino Babers is coming in to recruit.
Yeah, you're going to have 6-7 guys
Mm-hmm.
a day sometimes.
Yeah. Even if you don't even have any guys, it's just
they just want to come in and
yeah.
walk through, talk to your coaches.
Right.
They've already built up relationships
Mm-hmm.
with their coaches that have, that was the other nice part, was a lot of our coaches growing up played college football and have built relationships with people in these programs, which I think put us at a little bit of an advantage, going to school in Ohio as opposed to, like, maybe another Midwestern state.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always super fortunate to be able to just have that at my disposal, I guess.
So how'd you land on Notre Dame?
I had no desire to go to Notre Dame at all growing up. My grandparents were big fans, but I really had, like, no desire ever to go. I went to camp. I went to the Irish Invasion camp my junior year. Took a few one-on-ones. I did okay. And, we talked to Coach Kelly after the camp, and he was like, yeah, like, if you're able to get into school, we'd love to have you as a walk-on. So I was like, okay, whatever. Like, maybe I'll apply and try and get in. And, I kind of went throughout my senior year. I didn't really have any offers out of my junior year. I was 165 pounds and, skinny white guy from Youngstown. It's like, you're really not going to get looked at by many people. So I had a decent senior year, though. I put on some weight, and I kind of filled out my body a little bit more. And I had Coach Kleiman come in, and Coach Nowitzki from Illinois State. And
Kleiman's a guy
Kleiman
from
was
North Dakota State.
Kleiman was at North Dakota State at the time, who's now at Kansas State. But he recruited me and kind of gave these other, like, FCS programs, like, the confidence to, like, kind of throw out a scholarship offer to me. End up getting offered by Air Force, but I didn't really want to make that commitment. And I applied to Notre Dame, and I got in. I was like, I really don't really see myself anywhere else. I went on a visit, and Fink was my host.
Okay, yeah.
And I had a great time with those guys, with the walk-ons. And I was like, yeah, this seems like the right fit for me. And they obviously pushed really hard. My parents pushing really hard to go to Notre Dame. And I didn't know anything about Notre Dame until I really went, visited with Fink, and learned a lot more about it. And I ended up just kind of like you took a visit and fell in love with the campus. And
Yeah.
it kind of goes the same way for a lot of people, it seems like.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to North Dakota State, and
I really wanted to. I really wanted to go play for Coach Kleiman. I just felt like it was a better long-term decision for me. Like, I was
he would have won.
realistic
You would
about.
have won 3 national championships if
I
you
would have
did,
won.
but-
I would have won 3 rings there, but it's. I mean, it was a long-term decision for me. Like, I knew I was never going to play in the NFL. I always had the long term in mind, I guess, because I everything that Fink told me on my visit, he's like, our business school's doing this and that, and my friends are, are setting up jobs here and there, and I was like, well, it seems like the right fit.
Yeah, and
based
Fink
on,
probably told you that he was balling too.
Yeah, and I heard about all the success that, that walk-ons have had at
Robbie.
I mean, you could go right to Brandon Hudson, like even Matt Salerno was our punt returner last year. Like Coach Kelly gave a lot of chances to walk-ons to get on the field, and Fink at the time was like, he was like the walk-on,
Yeah,
he was the walk-on,
Right.
Is Fink who's he with now?
The Bears.
The Bears,
yeah. The Bears, yeah.
So Fink's at the Bears, but yeah, he convinced me like 100% to go there.
Yeah, his mom went on his visit to North Dakota State with him. I didn't go. I couldn't go, obviously, because at the time I was coaching at YSU, so we had a visit recruiting. And I was like, well, there's no way she's going to let him go to North Dakota State. So she comes back and she goes, I got to tell you, I was so impressed. I would be fine with him going. I'm like, maybe I should have went.
The people there, it's kind of like Ohio. Like they just love football,
right.
like North Dakota State
I'm
football.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
And that's all that they have up there,
right.
Is the North Dakota State football game. So, I mean, it's kind of like Notre Dame a little bit, where like you walk around and people know who you are. When you walk around campus and stuff, it's very similar there, but you just don't.
Did you go to a game too?
No, I never went to a game. I just saw his games because he was competing against him whenever he was at YSU. So I never went to a game up there, but obviously went to this whenever I was there.
Oh, that place rocks now.
Oh, really? It's insane.
Yeah, it's like
they had like a.
They're on top of you. They're like you sit there to like if I'm sitting here on the bench, the fans are like right there. Now it's a dome.
It's kind of like Michigan a little bit. How it's like raised.
It kind of goes down in and but they probably only holds, I don't know, 30,000 maybe. But it's
bumping.
Packed in, and it is loud.
Yeah.
What was the loudest place? What was the loudest place you think we played in? Georgia? Or Texas had to have been loud for
Texas.
you, yeah.
They have the cannon, so every time and the score was probably like 60-56 or something, and so every time they score, they shoot the cannon. So they scored a lot, and it was very.
The score was 60-56.
It was up there. It was up there. Like it went to overtime, like double overtime. So
okay.
But even then, like regulation, we might have been like 40 something. Like we scored in the 40s. So. It was a tough game for the defense for sure.
Yeah.
And but
wasn't that when Texas had those monsters at receiver? They had those big. Weren't they? They
had a big quarterback. Tyrone Swoops.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But they ended up not doing much that year.
Ellinger was. They had like two. They had played two quarterbacks. Swoops was like the runner, and then I think it was Ellinger. He was. He was the pocket passer. But they also had a good running back. I forget Foreman. I think he's in the NFL now.
Yeah.
But